I never meant to stare as long as I did. But the truth is, I couldn't stop. The wrench slipped from my hand and clattered against the tile floor, the sound too loud in the quiet kitchen. She turned, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek, and I swear she knew. "Everything okay under there?" Her voice carried a calm warmth, the kind that made me forget how to answer. "Yeah, just stuck," I mumbled from under the sink. The truth was, I'd finished the repair 5 minutes ago. I was only still crouched there because I didn't want to leave. Her kitchen smelled faintly of coffee and something floral, like the perfume that lingered on her wrist. I pushed myself up, wiping my palms on my jeans, trying to look casual. She leaned against the counter, watching me in that quiet way of hers. Not accusing, not expectant, just noticing. "You've got a talent for this," she said softly, nodding toward the fixed faucet. "I'd still be waiting days if I called a plumber. Guess I like keeping busy." My voice came out rougher than I wanted. She smiled, slow and knowing. She was in her late 40s, maybe, though the way she carried herself made age feel irrelevant. She had this calm confidence that made me second-guess every word out of my mouth. The silence stretched. Not uncomfortable exactly, just heavy, like the air before a storm. I fiddled with the wrench again, my thumb running over the cold metal, and when I glanced up, her eyes hadn't moved from me. "Thanks," she said finally, her tone dropping quieter. "It's nice having someone around who doesn't treat me like I'm invisible." I almost said something stupid, like I could never miss you, but I bit it back. Instead, I shifted, pretending to pack my tools, though my hands weren't steady. Her gaze flicked to them, then back to my face. "You're trembling." The words hung there. "Just tired." I lied. She tilted her head, studying me in a way that made my chest tighten. I couldn't tell if she believed me, but she didn't press. Instead, she walked to the window and adjusted the curtain, her movements slow, graceful. Sunlight spilled in, catching the curve of her shoulder beneath the thin fabric of her blouse. I forced myself to look away, but it was useless. My pulse was in my throat. I hated how obvious it must have been, the way my eyes followed her. She didn't seem to mind. If anything, there was the faintest curl at the corner of her lips. The clock ticked too loud. Outside, a bird called. But in that kitchen, everything was narrowed down to the sound of her breath and the space between us. I swallowed hard. "I should probably stay a little longer," she said without turning. The words stopped me cold. When she finally faced me, her expression was calm, but her eyes burned with something I didn't have the courage to name. She walked closer, stopping just a step away. The faint scent of her perfume reached me again, dizzying. Her hand brushed mine as she passed the wrench back, her fingers grazing too long to be accidental. My skin burned where she touched. She leaned in, close enough that her voice was almost a whisper. "I know what you've been thinking." The room seemed to tilt. My breath caught, and then she smiled, just enough to let me know everything had changed. Her words were still echoing in my head. "I know what you've been thinking." I stood there, wrench heavy in my hand, and all I could think was that I should leave. Walk out the door before I said something I couldn't take back. But I didn't. Instead, I watched her move to the table, sliding into the chair with a kind of weary grace. She rubbed her temples briefly, as if she carried more than she ever let on. For a moment, she didn't look like the woman I'd built up in my head, confident, untouchable, but someone human, someone tired. I set the wrench down quietly. "Rough week." She looked up, surprised I'd noticed. A small laugh escaped her. "You could say that. Divorce papers don't exactly sign themselves." The words landed heavier than I expected. My chest tightened. I hadn't known, though maybe I should have guessed. "I'm sorry," I said softly. She shrugged, though her eyes betrayed the ache. "Don't be. It was overdue. Still feels strange, though. The house is so Quiet now. The silence stretched again, thicker this time. I wanted to say something comforting, but everything I thought of sounded wrong. So I just stood there, watching the way her fingers toyed with the handle of her coffee mug, tracing the rim over and over like she was trying to ground herself. I noticed little things, the faint line on her forehead that deepened when she frowned, the way her blouse slipped off one shoulder when she leaned forward, the shadow of tiredness beneath her eyes. She was beautiful, but not in the polished, perfect way people post online. She was beautiful in the way that made you want to stay, to listen, to notice every detail. "You don't have to keep me company," I said finally, though the thought of leaving made my stomach twist. Her lips curved into a faint, wry smile. "Maybe I don't want you to go." I froze. My pulse thudded in my ears. You don't." She tilted her head, studying me like she had earlier. "You think I haven't noticed?" "Noticed what?" My voice cracked, betraying me. "The way you look at me, like I'm still worth looking at." Her words nearly knocked the air from my lungs. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She reached across the table, her hand brushing my forearm, just enough pressure to make my skin prickle with heat. "Stay a little longer," she said again, softer this time. I should have pulled away. I should have laughed it off, made some excuse. But I didn't. My eyes locked on hers, and I felt the floor tilt again, the whole world narrowing to the space between her hand and my skin. My throat was dry. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Maybe not," she whispered, her thumb grazing my arm. "But when was the last time either of us did the safe thing?" The clock ticked, loud and unforgiving. I swallowed hard, caught in her gaze, and knew there was no turning back. I told myself I'd only stay a few more minutes, just long enough not to seem rude. But the way her thumb had brushed my arm still burned through my skin, and leaving felt impossible. She rose from the table to refill her coffee, the sunlight catching her hair in soft glints. "You want some?" "Yeah, sure." My voice sounded too casual, too thin. She handed me the mug, her fingers grazing mine. Not long enough to be obvious, just long enough that my pulse spiked. "You always this nervous?" she teased gently, sliding back into her chair. I laughed too quickly. "I'm not nervous." Her eyes narrowed, amused. "You're terrible at lying." I looked away, pretending to sip, though the coffee was too hot. My throat was already dry anyway. Then, out of nowhere, her phone buzzed on the counter. The sound shattered the fragile stillness. She glanced at the screen, and I caught a glimpse of the name before she flipped it face down. "Do you need to?" "No," she interrupted quickly. "It can wait." I shouldn't have felt the rush of relief I did, but I did. She leaned back in her chair, sighing softly, her shoulders relaxing as if putting that call aside had been a decision she'd been waiting to make. The small motion made her blouse slip lower on one shoulder, and I had to look away. "Why do you help me so much?" she asked suddenly. "You could be out with friends, doing, I don't know, anything else." I hesitated. "I like being here." Her eyes softened, but she didn't press. She just studied me, like she was searching for something in my face I didn't know I had to give. I shifted in my chair, trying to ground myself. We should probably stop," she supplied, her lips curving slightly. I swallowed. "Yeah, maybe." For a moment, neither of us moved. The ticking clock filled the silence again, marking every second we didn't. Then she reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. Not tentative this time, deliberate. The touch was warm, steady, and it made my chest ache. "You can tell me," she whispered. "Tell you what?" "What you've been thinking." The air between us felt charged, dangerous. I could smell the faint sweetness of her perfume, hear the subtle catch in her breath. My heart was hammering so hard I thought she might hear it. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, there was a sharp knock at the door. We both froze. Her hand pulled back slowly, reluctantly, like neither of us wanted the moment to end. The knock came again, louder this time. She stood, smoothing her blouse, her face composed but her eyes still burning with the unspoken. "Don't move," she murmured, and as she crossed the room to answer, I sat there gripping the mug, wondering if we'd already gone too far, or if the real line was still waiting for us to cross. The knock faded into silence after a minute, whoever it was finally giving up. She closed the door gently, leaning against it for a moment like she needed to catch her breath. When she turned back, her eyes found mine immediately, too quickly, too sure. "You didn't leave," she said softly. "I said I'd wait." Something flickered across her face. Relief, maybe, or something heavier. She walked back to the table, each step slow, deliberate, as if she was buying time she knew neither of us had. I tried to speak, but the words tangled in my throat. That could have been important. "It wasn't," she cut in, sitting across from me again. Her voice was calm, but her fingers curled against the tabletop. "Nothing feels as important as this." The confession hung there between us, raw and dangerous. My stomach twisted. "You can't just say things like that," I murmured. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Why not? You already know." I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling hard. "You don't get it. I think about you too much, and I keep telling myself it's wrong, that I should walk away before I do something I can't take back." "Then why don't you?" The question cut deep, sharper than she intended. My chest tightened. "Because I don't want to," I admitted, the words spilling before I could stop them. Her breath caught, just barely audible. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on mine. "Say that again." "I don't want to," I repeated, my voice lower, rougher. For a moment, she just stared at me, as if memorizing the words, letting them sink in. Then her hand reached across the table, trembling slightly this time, and settled over mine. "You think you're the only one fighting this?" she whispered. The room went silent. Even the clock seemed to pause. My thumb brushed against her hand without meaning to, a small, desperate gesture. "I don't know where this goes," I admitted, my throat tight. "I just know I don't want to stop." Her eyes softened, glistening with something unspoken. "You're not the only one." The honesty in her voice nearly undid me. Every part of me screamed to close the distance, to cross the line we'd been circling for what felt like forever. But I stayed still, frozen in the weight of it. She searched my face, her expression open, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. "So, what do we do now?" The question hit harder than a kiss would have. My breath caught, my heart racing. I didn't answer, couldn't. We just sat there, her hand in mine, the silence between us louder than any words, both of us waiting for the other to move first. Her question lingered in the air. "What do we do now?" When the faint buzz of her phone cut through the silence again. She ignored it, but this time, curiosity pulled my eyes toward the screen before she could flip it over. I saw the name. My stomach sank. It wasn't a stranger. It was my father. I froze. My pulse hammered in my ears as the realization crashed into me. She noticed. Her eyes followed mine, and when she saw what I'd seen, her hand slipped from mine like she'd touched fire. She started, then stopped, her breath unsteady. The room spun. She hadn't told me. "You should have said something," I whispered, my voice harsher than I meant. Her face tightened. "I wanted to. She looked down, twisting her hands together. "I didn't know how." The weight of it pressed down on me. My father, the man I'd barely spoken to since the divorce. And now, sitting here in the kitchen with her, I felt like I was caught in the middle of a storm I hadn't seen coming. "You think this makes it easier?" I asked, my words sharper now, though they shook with the effort of holding back more. "Because it doesn't. It makes it—" I trailed off, not trusting myself to finish. She stood suddenly, pacing toward the window. Sunlight cut across her profile, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain, fragile. I thought if I kept it simple, if I didn't say anything, you'd walk away before this went too far. Her voice cracked, low and raw. But you didn't, and I didn't want you to. The honesty in her tone broke through my anger, though it didn't erase it. I stood too, my fists clenching and unclenching at my sides. So what now? Do we pretend this didn't happen? Pretend I don't? My voice faltered. Don't want you every second I'm near you? Her eyes snapped to mine, wide, searching. You think I don't feel the same? The air thickened again, heavier than before. I took a step toward her, then stopped, torn between every reason this was wrong and every reason I couldn't leave. I can't be the reason you regret this, I said finally. Her lips trembled, but she held my gaze. You won't be. The silence that followed was electric, the kind that begged for something to shatter it. Then, as if the universe wanted to test us, the phone buzzed again. Louder, persistent. She didn't move. Neither did I. Finally, she whispered, If you walk out now, I'll understand. But if you stay... She didn't finish. She didn't have to. The choice hung in the air between us, heavier than any confession. As the phone buzzed one last time and fell silent, the phone finally went silent, leaving only the sound of our breathing. She stood by the window, her shoulders tense, as though bracing herself for whatever I'd choose. I couldn't move at first. My body was at war with itself, torn between every reason I should walk away and the one reason I couldn't. You're scared, I said quietly. Her eyes flicked to mine. So are you. Yeah. I admitted, my throat tight. But not of you. For a heartbeat, she just stared. Then she exhaled, a shaky sound that broke something in me. I didn't want this to happen, she whispered. But then you kept showing up, fixing things I didn't even know were broken. And suddenly the house didn't feel so empty anymore. I swallowed hard, my chest aching. And I kept telling myself it was just helping out, just being around. But every time I left, I couldn't stop thinking about coming back. Her lips parted, like she wanted to answer, but no words came. Instead, she turned fully toward me, her eyes bright, vulnerable in a way that stripped me bare. I don't know if we're strong enough to handle what this means, she said finally. Maybe we don't have to know, I murmured. I stepped closer, close enough to see the faint tremor in her hands, the way she was fighting the same war I was. Maybe it's enough that we're here. For a moment she didn't move. Then, with a small, broken sound, she reached for me. Her hand slid into mine, gripping tightly, like she was afraid I might vanish if she let go. Tell me this isn't a mistake, she whispered, her voice trembling. I squeezed her hand, leaning closer until our foreheads almost touched. If it is, then it's the only one I've ever wanted to make. Her laugh came out choked, half sob, half relief. And then she was in my arms, not perfect, not graceful, but real, warm, shaking, clinging like I was the anchor she hadn't let herself need. For the first time all night, the silence didn't feel dangerous. It felt safe. We stayed like that, holding on, not knowing what tomorrow would bring but certain that neither of us wanted to let go. When she finally pulled back, her hand lingered against my cheek. So, you're staying? I looked at her, really looked, and felt the answer settle deep inside me. I'm not going anywhere. The relief in her eyes nearly undid me all over again. She leaned in, her lips brushing so close I could feel her breath. And though we still hadn't crossed that final line, the choice was already made. The clock ticked softly in the background, marking the start of something neither of us could take back. And for once, I didn't want to. The kitchen felt different in the quiet after. Not just quieter, lighter, like some invisible weight had finally been set down. She still hadn't let go of my hand, and I hadn't asked her to. We sat back at the table, the coffee long gone cold, but neither of us cared. You realize, she said softly, her thumb brushing over my knuckles. This changes everything. I gave a half smile. It already has. She studied me, her expression caught somewhere between fear and relief. I don't want you to wake up one day and regret this. Regret me. The thought stung. Do you think I could sit here, knowing everything I know now, and regret it? I shook my head. I've been trying so hard to pretend, to convince myself it was just helping out, just coincidence. But I don't want to pretend anymore. Her eyes glistened, and for the first time, she didn't hide it. Neither do I. The honesty in her voice settled something in me I hadn't even realized was restless. We weren't pretending anymore. We weren't circling around words unsaid. We were here, together. I thought about the buzzing phone, about the name I'd seen, about how wrong this should feel. And yet, when I looked at her, all I could think was that sometimes life doesn't wait for perfect timing. Sometimes you just have to reach for what makes you feel alive. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, I admitted. Neither do I. She smiled faintly. But maybe we'll figure it out. One morning at a time. Her words landed softly, like a promise. I leaned closer, brushing my forehead against hers. No dramatic kiss, no grand declarations. Just the quiet certainty that we were choosing this. Choosing each other. The silence stretched, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was full of possibilities, of unspoken vows, of the kind of peace I hadn't expected to find. Later, as I left the kitchen light glowing behind us, I realized I'd stopped feeling like a visitor in her home. I wasn't just helping with repairs anymore. I was staying. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone. Red Heart, did you enjoy the story? Thought Balloon, what kind of stories would you like to hear next?